Norman Jayden. I want to be an actor. And they go, no, you don't. I felt like a muggle that had accidentally ended up at Hogwarts.
Oh, there is like a. So, hello guys. My name is Diana. I'm an agent, and welcome to Enigma podcast. That is the podcast where we dive deep into the world of creativity and explore the creative journeys of artists, creators, and writers. So today I'm with agent Leon Ockenden, who is known for his role of Norman Jayden. Sorry, not Norman, Norman Jayden from the game Heavy Rain.
Please step back. Agent Norman Jayden, FBI.
And he has appeared in various TV films and series such as The Cosmonaut, Waterloo Road, Mr. Selfridge, Coronation Street, and he is also a director and a screenwriter. So could you please introduce yourself for us, Leon?
Wow, Diana, what an introduction. You've made me feel very special. I wish I recognized that person you're speaking about. He sounds great. I'd like to meet him.
Yes, so could you
so
please introduce yourself for us?
yes, I am Leon Ockenden, and I was definitely in a computer game called Heavy Rain, where I did play FBI, psychological profiler, Norman Jayden.
Yeah, Norman
And
Jayden.
that's right. And for most of my adult life, I've been pursuing the world of being an actor after an early stint in my life of being a baker and a chef pâtissier.
Yes,
And
also a baker.
yeah, also a baker. And yeah, in the last couple of years, I've set up a very small little production company from with a director of photography I met on a short film called David, and we made Giddy Kipper films. And so we've just been starting to make some branded content for people, as well as pursuing our own longer form ideas and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
actually, I
that's what
have a
do.
question about Giddy Kipper, so we'll
Oh yeah.
dive into that. Yeah, so should we maybe keep them this way, or how would you like?
Well, I like seeing your face, Dan. Of course, yeah.
Thank you very much. So, as for the first question, I would like to start with the very beginning of your journey. So, what inspired you to pursue a career in acting, and how did you get your start in this industry? So, you started as a baker, right? And then what made you pursue this career as an actor?
I come from a very small little fishing village in the West Country of England. And I think what was interesting was I probably knew definitely around the age of 14 that I might like to do something creative in my life or pursue a life in the sort of arts. But I don't come from an artistic sort of, or a family that have worked in the arts before. And so in Lewin, Cornwall, there wasn't like a big cultural hub or anything. So I didn't really have any role models or people that were close. That it felt like a life and world in storytelling and acting was, that was for people beyond Lewin, Cornwall, not for people from a little fishing village. And so I remember the moment though, and it, as is often the case, it has a lot to do with, a teacher spotting something in you that you didn't even maybe see yourself. Because this always surprises people, I think, is I'm actually quite a shy person, but I compensate a lot by being a bit silly on the outside of my persona. But I was very I was very shy at school, and I only had a few friends. And I remember year 9, so it's the third year of your high school, I guess. There was the school I went to. You're allowed to put your name down, so you wanted to be in the school play. And there was a Mrs. Rennie put up these sheets, and you could audition for a big part with lots of lines and responsibility, a medium-sized part with a medium amount of lines and responsibility, or a small part with either no lines but very small amount of responsibility. So I put my name very small in that little column there. And over that summer term, Mrs. Rennie kept asking me to come back and just read with another person, and then read with another person, and I noticed that I was getting these chances to read these slightly bigger and bigger roles and do a lot of different things. And then she ended up casting me in a big part, and I was sharing the role of Oliver in Oliver Twist with Paul Hoskin, and it meant that I was in the school play, and Paul would, like, he'd do one night, I'd do the other night, and but then we'd play a smaller part when we were not playing Oliver, and that meant I had to do like all these crowd scenes where you have Oliver and you're creating all the pickpockets and stuff like that. And I remember, as I'm sure you can imagine, school plays can be really rubbish and torturous for adults to sit through. And Mrs. Rennie was a fine teacher, and I'm sure it was probably bearable to sit through. But I remember that I was doing one of these big crowd scenes, and something happened with one of the main actors when they all left the stage and ran off, where he dropped his hat, and I improvised a bit of business with someone playing a sort of supporting artist police officer, and it made all of these adults laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember having this rush of like, wow, that feels amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then and because it was genuine as well, in the way that I guess, you know, laughter, it can really, you know, it tells you, I guess there's the joy of being a stand-up, right? Is if they're laughing, it's definitely working. And if they're not, I imagine it's the worst feeling in the world. And so I made them laugh. And then after that, for years, it was like this little secret I had, because like you couldn't really, I guess there was a certain element to that small village mentality of like, you can't dream too big, because obviously it's, you know, a small town where the industry like fishing and stuff had sort of died away, and mining in Cornwall. And so mainly Cornwall was a place for tourism. And so at the age of 14, at the same time as doing this play, I started working in a bakery as a little Saturday boy. And I'd go and work. And then over the course of, towards the end of my schooling, I didn't know if I was going to go to college. I wasn't very academic. And they offered me an apprenticeship, which was when I finished school at 15. I then went and did 2 years there. And I went to college one day a week to do the studying of baking. And that was a bit of a funny time, because by that point I'd worked at the bakery so long, I was doing like shifts where I'd make 700 pasties, 1,000 loaves, Danish pastries, this. And then the first day at college was, you're making one large white tin loaf of bread. Oh. And it was like, oh my God, we got 4 hours to do this. And I was like, oh, it's going to take forever. And so I was an apprentice baker. I worked at this family-run bakery. And then at the end of my baking training, everyone submits, and this happens nationwide. All the bakers in England, there's often a conference of the National Association, say it carefully, Master Bakers. And what they do is they look at everyone's breaded goods and baked goods, and they give out awards for the ones they like. And I won some awards for my hot cross buns.
Oh, that's so good.
My wholemeal loaf and my Battenberg cake. And they offered me the chance basically to go and work in Germany for 6 months and Sweden for 6 months as part of this European cultural catering student exchange program. And that was like my passport out of this little town. And initially I wasn't going to go, because I had a girlfriend called Debbie Dubb, and I just bought myself a car. And then my mum, I think in all of her wisdom, she was like, it's an opportunity which you should probably seriously consider, and I think you'd benefit from it. And I was like, oh, and I think you should really think about it. And then I decided to do it, and I had like an amazing year. And I was 17 when I left, so left home basically, and I got to live and work in another country, you know, a foreign country in Germany, and then I'd do the same in Sweden. And then I came back to Cornwall, and everyone was, I thought they'd want to ask me, you know, what I've been up to and all of that. And all they cared about was like, oh, have you heard about so-and-so? He's got her up the duff, and so-and-so's pregnant. And I was like, oh, they haven't asked me anything, because like their world is like so small. And I was like, I don't think I can live here anymore. So I worked at the Munich City Hilton, and they were desperate for me to go back and work there. But I didn't want to go back and work there because I had a relationship with a woman in Germany that went bad and broke my heart a little bit. And so I wrote to the London Hilton on Park Lane, and then they gave me the opportunity to come and interview. And so this is, I guess, a reflection on my socio-economic status. I had to borrow a suit because no one in our family had a suit. And so I borrowed a suit because I thought that's how you should go to an interview. You need a suit to wear. And of course, I wore the suit, and this suit was from a person who's quite a bit bigger than me. So I was drowning in this big suit, and I went up on the train to this interview, and then realized, oh yeah, chefs don't care about whether if you're in a suit or not. And I got this job and worked really hard there. And I think the reason I'm sort of telling you this was it was part of my growing up. So by the time I'd got to 19, I'd lived away from home. I was now working in London at the Hilton on Park Lane. I had quite a lot of responsibility at this place. And me and this guy, William Ritchie, were thick as thieves. We were running this section, the banqueting section, supposed to have 8 people on it. And it just had the 2 of us. And it meant that we were working 16 to 20 hours a day, most days. We had banquets of banqueting season from October through to January is like 1,000 for lunch, 1,000 for dinner every day. And we were supposed to have 8 people on our section. It was just me and him. And we were quite young, I guess, and just enjoying like working hard. And we got through banqueting season. It was a bit of a miracle. And I had no life outside of work. Like on the occasional time I'd have a day off.
No
because I didn't know
work-life balance at all.
No. And I didn't know anyone else in London. And so I would often, always end up, if I had a day off, I'd be like, what do? I don't know anyone. I was living in an illegal hostel that cost £5 a night. And that was run by the Russian mafia, actually, this guy Romeo. And it was what I didn't realize, because it was in Brixton, and it was a place where people who were coming out of Brixton prison could come and live at a very cheap rate for London to kind of get themselves back on track. And we were in a room not much bigger than this, like a normal sized bedroom, but it was like triple high bunk beds. And so there were 12 of us in one room sleeping. And Romeo was amazed because I was the longest person that had ever stayed in these rooms. I mean, I once got the guy in the bunk below me because there was nowhere secure to put your stuff. So you have your bag at the end of the bed. And the guy below me, when I got back from a long shift one day, beat me up because I didn't have any clean socks for him to wear in my bag. and so I had quite an adventure in London, but it was all centered around work. And so oftentimes, because I didn't know anyone, on my day off, if I had a day off, I'd go in to work and I'd end up working and just kind of, be there and help out. And then we got to the end of March, and it was 10:30 in the evening. And William looked at me, and William had just got promotion, and because for all the hard work we were doing. And the Hilton were very canny back then because catering tends to have quite a high turnover of employees. And if you worked there for 12 months, you'd get a reference, which meant that you could then probably go and get like an easier job somewhere else, because it was like doing these hard yards at the Hilton. So you get that posh thing on your CV, and then you could go work at a country club or a hotel or somewhere that was a bit easier. And we've been there 9 months. I've been there 9 months at this point. And so we're not far off from getting that reference. And William turned around and looked at me, and we had a banquet for 500 people the next day. And he said to me, "Oh, we haven't gone for a pint in ages. Do you want to go for a pint now? Come in super early, like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, or do we work on till 2, half 2, get most of it ready and come in around 7, 8?" I was like, "Let's go for a pint. We haven't been for a pint in ages." And we sat there in this pub in Mayfair, which is a very expensive part of London, and we didn't really say anything to each other. And he was just drinking his pint, and then he looked at me and said, "I've had enough of this." And I was like, yeah, me too. And he was like, "Do you want to go to Argentina?" And I was like, "When?" And he was like, "Now." And I was like, "Okay." And so we went and packed our bags. He lived in Brixton as well. I left Romeo a little note telling him I was leaving him and leaving finally and paying the final week's rent. And cut a long story short, we ended up in Amsterdam because we didn't have the money to get to Argentina initially. And then we ended up living in Amsterdam for 6 months. William still lives there, actually. And I guess the reason I tell you that is that was like, by that point, I would have been coming up to 20. And the work I was doing in Amsterdam, I realized I wasn't going to be a chef patissier for the rest of my life, because it's not like I was the type of person who would go to sleep thinking, what am I going to do with this lemon tomorrow? I'm going to turn it into the most amazing lemon cheesecake or whatever. I was good at hard work, but it wasn't like, my passion. And so I came back to the UK, and over the course of doing all of this hard work, I guess I saw this little flame from that moment where I made everyone laugh. I've been protecting in there and keeping secret from everyone. And I went into they have these places in the UK called like a job center or a careers advice place. And you go in there and you can either, they tell you what jobs are around, or like, maybe they give you some advice on where you could go. And I went in and I the first time ever, I mentioned to another person, I was like, I want to be an actor. And they're like, no, you don't. And I was like, well, okay, I've got a trade, I've got a job I can fall back on. And I'm like, okay, well, have you heard of drama schools? And I was like, no, what are they? And they told me about drama schools, and then they gave me a list. And then I essentially ended up auditioning for drama schools. And because of a guy I was working with in a pub who was studying classics at Oxford, I looked at you had to do like 2 speeches and some places a song. And one of the things, you had to do a classical speech, like a Shakespeare or a contemporary of Shakespeare. And I had no clue, because I'm very stupid, still am very stupid, about Shakespeare. And luckily this guy I was working with, Dan, he was studying classics at Oxford, and he was like, I'll teach you the speech you need to learn. And so he taught me a speech from Much Ado About Nothing. And I think he obviously did a good enough job, because I got into some drama schools, and then I ended up getting basically a bursary to cover my training for 3 years at Lambda. And so I went from telling someone about this little secret, taking it seriously. And I think, like, for me, what happened was I'd worked quite hard, and I guess I'd been, was quite young to be out living in Europe by myself and stuff. And it gave me a little bit of confidence of like, well, there's some point in your life where you're just going to keep it secret, or you're going to try and do something about it. And I chose to do something about it. And then I guess the path revealed itself, and I got a little place at drama school. And then that was the beginning. And I really struggled at drama school, especially in my first year, because everyone else was so clever and so confident and so talented, and they'd read all the plays, they'd been in loads of productions. And I just felt like I felt like a muggle that had accidentally ended up at Hogwarts and couldn't do any magic. And everyone else was like all these super talented people. And then over the course of my training, thanks to my, I guess, good teachers again or whatever, I got a little bit of confidence. By year 2, I started to get a little bit of confidence. And then in year 3, you basically do lots of public performances. And Lambda, because I guess it's located in London, and that's where a lot of like agents and casting directors and creatives are based. And so we get a lot of agents and casting directors coming to the drama school productions. And from that, I ended up getting an agent. And then your agent, especially if you're someone like me, like not connected to people in the industry, that in my year group at Lambda, there were lots of people that, their uncle had been an actor, or their dad, or they knew people within the industry. And I guess it felt like a much more, it was something that, you can just go and do. Whereas for me, it felt like this thing that was really out of reach. And so an agent becomes your, and certainly for me, became my conduit to that world. And I got my first little television job before the end of my final year. And so then that was like a real moment of like, hang on, that they're actually paying me to do this. This is crazy. Like I'm getting paid. Especially because I'm pretty sure I wasn't very good, but they still paid me anyway. So that was it. And so that's basically the long-winded way. So I basically went through a long journey of having to grow up to the point where I was like, well, if you don't do it now, you're probably never going to do it. And I think we I'm sure you've met people in your life, Diana, where they're always going to get round to writing that book, or they're going to,
Yeah.
being that
All the
production
time.
stuff, and it becomes something which, because it can be scary, because when you're daring to be creative, you make yourself vulnerable, right? Because there were lots of very talented people in my year, and not all of them got an agent. And at that time, when you're back at drama school, it feels like getting an agent feels like the biggest thing in the world. Like I don't think it really is. I think the most successful actor from my year group left without an agent, and they just had the qualities you also need in a creative endeavor, which is I love it and I keep going regardless, no matter what. So she's doing very well.
As for another question, can you share a particular role that challenged you the most, and what did you learn from that experience?
Well, Dana, I know that I guess I came to your attention, didn't I, through Heavy Rain? That was yeah, and I think like that's sort of worth speaking about a little bit because that was a really unusual process. The audition was pretty similar to how auditions run, which is you get some audition sides and then you audition, and then I did it firstly with the casting director, and then came back and David Cage was there, and then I got this job. And initially, my agent told me it was going to be 10 days in Paris, and they're doing this thing called motion capture, which back then no one knew what it was. And okay, fine. And it's they're going to record your face and voice, and you're going to get scanned and go into a computer. Like, okay, cool. And that job ended up not being 10 to 15 days. It probably, in total for me, it was probably around like somewhere between 25 and 30, but it ended up being over 3 years.
Oh.
And because back then the cameras for motion capture were so expensive that you'd be on they had a big sound sort of stage, and you could record all of the body stuff, but you couldn't record the face and voice at the same time. Like now what Andy Serkis has done with the Imaginarium and everything is like they do it. And then this was like being in a wetsuit with like ping pong balls on. And what would happen as well is even if you were moving around, like there's lots of running and stuff to do, if one of those balls dropped off, it was like a useless take.
Oh,
and so because the computer because the computer can't read like the dimensions and stuff, and it was quite awkward because it meant that if you were doing a scene with someone else and you touch them, you're not allowed to cover up that, and so you go to do something natural, and so it was quite process to learn. And then going and recording all of the face and voice stuff separately, but they glue these then at that point they glue them to your face.
Agent Norman Jayden, FBI. You got a badge or something, Mr. Jayden?
Yeah, of course.
Check. You can pass.
And I remember it was really hot in Paris, and so it meant that sometimes I'd be doing all this Norman acting and Norman acting and getting a bit into it, I guess. But then sometimes I could feel like a bead of sweat, like I feel like, oh no, one of these things is going to drop off, and if it drops off, it's going to be a useless take. And I think because of the length of that, and because of how different it is to anything else I'd done up to that point, that was one of the most challenging roles in terms of, because it was a whole new technique. Whereas, like a professional play, and oftentimes they're pretty much like a school play, just with better lights and better costumes, and and so it feels like quite a natural sort of thing. And then because initially I did quite a bit. My first few jobs came from British television, and there's no real training for what it's like to be in front of a camera, well, especially back then. There is now, I guess. I think it's a lot better because obviously cameras are cheaper and everyone sort of has them. But that kind of acting, because of we've all watched lots of stuff, and and especially if you like it, it kind of feels like it. Whereas the motion capture was like a complete step into the unknown, and trusting in, I guess, David Cage's vision, and just really committing to that. Because sometimes I'd have to do some really weird stuff, and you're like, "Are you sure this is good? I'm not sure." And like you're telling me to do it like I was for a film or TV, and like but no, and then obviously. The lovely thing about that is I know it came out and it was a game that really divided opinion because it did, like, its pacing was a lot slower. It wasn't just hack and slash and that kind of thing. And then what's been lovely is it's definitely the character I've played which has had the most enduring appeal over time, because there was when I was in the show called Mr. Selfridge, I remember this lovely young actor called Greg Austin, and it took him like 2 weeks, and we were getting along really well with each other. But like, it was 2 weeks before he got the courage to say, "By the way, I love Heavy Rain, and I've played as you." So I was like, "Oh my god!" Like, I just think, because I'd watched Mr. Selfridge, I was like, I just thought he was like this really cool young actor, and like and obviously going places, and now like doing amazingly well. And the fact that he knew about this game was like blew my mind. And so it's definitely the character which seems to have connected with people in the most meaningful way. And then, on a personal level, there was this show I did very early on called Tripping Over, and I made a decision early on, which I'm not sure if I do, or I definitely wouldn't do now, but this audition process happened where the agent said, they're looking for regional accents, do your West Country accent. And I read this script, and this character was very confused sexually in terms of he was definitely gay, but he was in a relationship with a woman, and he was, as you meet him in the script, he's kind of like, he'd be either really partying or be catatonic and crying and really sort of struggling with his own identity of who he was and who he really was, I guess. And as I read the script, I was like, if you start speaking like this, you see, there's a way, and this accent I'm doing now is from the West Country, which is where I'm from. And the thing is, it has such a connotation with like period dramas, and like you're the servant character or you're the farmer. I was like, this character's like supposed to be sexy and confused, and like, and I was like, it just doesn't sound right. So I based him on the voice and the walk on this guy I went to drama school with, who I was a bit in love with, because I looked up to him because I thought he was like the best actor I'd ever met in my life. And I did that at the audition, and then when I ended up finally landing the job, on the way to the airport, because the first part of the job we were filming in Bangkok, so it was quite an amazing job. For like, we filmed in Bangkok, Sydney, London, and then Melbourne, and we were traveling around the world, and it was all very exciting. But on the way there, because I knew that, so in the UK, like where I am right now in the north of England, the north and the people in the north of England, they're always suspicious of Southerners like me, because they think, they're like, it's a common saying up here is like, what do you want to go down that London for? And any Northerner really doesn't like it when a Southern actor does a Northern accent, because they're like, why are you taking our work, our jobs, all this? And I'd chosen to do a Northern accent, and the actor playing my girlfriend in the show, and we split up at the end of episode 1, she was a genuine Northerner. And I knew, and she was like, I knew, I'd seen a lot of her TV work. So I'm in the car on the way to the airport, and I just decided I'm going to do the accent for the whole shoot, which was 3 and a bit months. And I met her there, and then she knew I was doing accent because we met at the audition room, and she's like, "Are you doing the accent?" Oh my god! And so I did the accent the whole time. But what happened was this: in Bangkok, all of the cast and crew were all staying in the hotel and stuff like. But I found it exhausting, like really keeping up this accent, like not just when doing like read-throughs or the work, but then also just socializing. So I kept myself to myself, and I didn't really socialize.
Mm.
With it, and everyone else was like going out in Bangkok, having a great time. So like, whoa, can't believe we're getting to work here. And this air of mystique built up around me, like Leon's a method actor. That's what he's doing, you know. And then I'd go out to go and get food, and they'd be like, he was out in character in Bangkok last night, and I wasn't. I just went out to get some street food because I was hungry or whatever. And I think because personally, at that time in my life, it wasn't a very happy time for me personally. It meant that I had direct access to a load of emotions, and it meant for that character, I'd either be crying my eyes out or like completely high on drugs, trying to shag everyone and make love to everyone. And like, you know, in episode 2, my character ends up having sex with this man looking at Sydney Harbour Bridge, and he's constructed this thing up on these tables to have sex with him, and then he falls off, and I grab him by his nipple chain, and then I end up trying to keep him up, and I rip his nipples off, and then we cut to them in the hospital. And so I think emotionally and from a filming perspective, because I painted myself into the corner with this accent thing, that was probably my most demanding but enjoyable and probably some of my best screen work, I'd say. So those 2 roles, the Callum in Tripping Over and Norman Jayden. That's the long answer to your question.
That's very interesting. And do you have maybe any specific techniques or rituals in order to prepare for the role, or you just go for it?
I tried a lot of different things. Now where I've sort of got to is, I think it's when I was younger, I would always be trying and you know, like trying to find my own way, or like think, because you know, like to be impressed by all those, like I was impressed by method acting and all of that stuff, and the aura that you'd hear these people talk in reverent tones about them. But the reality for me now is, and I try and think it's in every part of my life, I'm not always good at it, but is, are we having a good time? That's my main philosophy. Are we having a good time? Because, you know, life is short, and we should be trying to make every moment. And of course, by mean, are we having a good time? It doesn't necessarily mean it always has to be easy. It just means that, because I think satisfaction is a better thing to aim for than just happiness. Because happiness is like, hey, I've had some candy floss and I've been on a ride, and it's like, it's great, but it's short lived. Whereas, you know, you probably know that feeling, like when you've worked on one of your poems or one of your screenplays, where, you know, it's not always easy, but like by sticking the course and staying with it, by the end of it, hopefully it's satisfying. So I would say, in terms of techniques or rituals, I don't have anything specific apart from like and you'll hear this a lot from, you know, actors and good actors, the more you can get yourself into that playful space where, you know, the great thing about being an actor is, unless you're doing a soliloquy, and if you're doing a soliloquy on stage, you are doing it with lots of other people, you're just doing it to the audience. But it's the joy of creative collaboration where, you know, we could be doing a scene together, you say it in a certain way, which I never would have thought when I read it, and it makes me react in a different way. And when you get to play, and you get to play professionally and get paid, then that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. And could you please tell us a little bit about your project Giddy, Kipper, and how did you decide to become a director and a screenwriter?
Well, it feels very grand calling me a director and screenwriter.
But you are.
Well, yeah, I guess so. My wife Vanessa prompted me to make my first short film a long time ago, and it was because I think I was doing a job where I wasn't particularly happy in, an acting job, and I think I was probably being a little bit of a prick about, like, you know, the writing isn't very good, blah blah blah. And I think Vanessa challenged me. She's like, "Well, can you do better?" And I was like, Okay, yeah, I will. And I wrote something, and I shared it with some uh, friends of mine who I thought might be able to help me make it. And I guess what was nice was they all said yes, and they'd come and work on it for free. And so we worked really hard over a weekend in North London, and we made this little short film called Desire, which I guess has a callback to my baking parts, because the main character opens up a little cupcake shop at the end of the film, and that was my first step into doing that. And what was really lovely was it was a short film, but I thought it was quite sweet in the script. Like I worked hard on, but people seemed to like people I really respected, like a director of photography, Paul Francis Jenkins. He immediately said yes, and he came on board to work on it. And it was like, oh my god, people are really responding. So that felt good, and so that gave me a little bit of confidence with kind of go, oh, maybe there'll be something in writing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then Giddy Kipper came about because I was producing a short film for my friend James Cameron, and I met this director of photography who was working on the film called David Ford. And we, with a very small crew up in Cumbria, we made this 30-minute short film in like 2.5 days. And it was very intense. Like there's a point in it where my friend James, who was the writer and director, he'd basically written this part for me. And it was based on one of my stories about when I saw a male bull getting raped to death by a load of other male bulls. And this forms like a 5-minute monologue in this film that I had to do. And we had a very small crew, and we were all staying in this tiny little cottage, and we all just had a really good time working together. And the four of us that were involved in trying to help, put all the production logistics together, tried to set up a sort of creative agency slash production company, because we all enjoyed that experience so much. And it didn't really work for a number of reasons. Probably the four of us, it didn't quite work because I guess when you're doing a startup thing, you need real startup mentality, which is, you can't just walk out and be like, well, to employ me as a writer and director, I'm £500 a day or whatever. Like you have to earn your thing, like to convince people. And we 2 years ago, I'd got to another point in my life where it was January. I didn't have any acting work on, no auditions coming in, and so like in going, all right, so, and I was back working in a pub in King's Cross for minimum wage, and I've got a wife and child at home, and my manager at this pub was 3 when I got married, and I'm like, what have I been doing with my life? Here I am back again at like this, like square one in January. And, it was a pool and snooker place. And we're, like our job was to, we would rent out these pool tables and snooker tables for £16 an hour, but we were getting paid £10 an hour. And I ended up depressing all of the young people I was working with by saying, look at this, we're human beings, and yet the world values these pool tables more than us. And they're like, oh, I've never thought of it like that. You've made me really, that's terrible. I don't want to do anything. And I was working there, and I got this little part in a Netflix thing, which meant that it was going to give me some work through the year. And David, Ford, the cinematographer I'd met on this short film, we'd made another short film in time together, and we made it all in a day at the bottom of my garden. And we had a really good time working together. And Dave and I we kept in touch and were friendly. And I think David was trying to prompt me to help rescue me from life working in this pub. And he was like, look, I know it didn't work when we tried to set up that other thing, but what about just the two of us try and do something? If it doesn't work, doesn't matter. Like we won't put any pressure on it. We'll just see how it goes. I was like, okay, well, I'm working in a pub for £10 an hour. I've got nothing to lose. Excuse me. And our first job, there's a guy called Rico Dix, and he was a 2 times European pool champion.
Mm.
And he would come in and play pool at this place a lot, and he'd actually donated a table and he'd do coaching and stuff. And the manager of the pub ended up saying, Leon's doing, he's a bit of a filming guy and he got stuff. And so we made our first little job was making I guess a promotional film for him and what he does, because now a lot of his work is he goes to hotels, does corporate events where he teaches people how to do trick shots. And by the end of the night, Diana, you and I have done trick shots and we feel amazing. So like, I couldn't play pool and now I can do all these shots. And that kind of got us off and running. And then it turned out that the hurricane rooms, where I was really sad about my life choices when I was working there in January, it became this place which one night this woman came in for a trial shift, and she's like me, a bit of a worker bee, and she just worked really hard, and we had a busy night just because it was like a Friday night and stuff, and we worked really hard, and I knew straight away that this wasn't her only gig. She must be doing something else. And she told me that she was, her main job was working for this festival where called Rewind, that is an 80s music festival and beyond. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I was like, how funny that I should have heard of that festival, because I'm basically, I grew up during the 80s, and I was like, I'm your target demographic. I should know about this. Why don't I know? Why have I never heard of this festival? And I took her number that night, and she never came back to work. She only did this trial shift, and then I think found some other work and her main work at Rewind. But we kept in touch, and then she reached out to me when they were wanting someone to do some event capture of like their festival in the 2 events. And so we went and did that. And then that's how Giddy Kipper has sort of evolved, where me and David just try and work hard. And we've been lucky enough to do some work for some brands and make some films. And so that's the other side of my life now, where we've got this little company, and it's a little bit scary because in January this year we took on our first employee. And because David, as well as being a brilliant cinematographer, is also very good at post-production stuff and very clever, and probably a bit like yourself, Diana, where because he's like he's like 15 years younger than me, he's really a man that has grown up in the age of YouTube and taught himself so much stuff about lighting and cameras and editing and all of this. Like, he's a real product of the positive side of what YouTube can do. It's an amazing resource. And what was slowing us with our workflow was it was always on David to end up editing the final projects and pulling them all together. And even though he's very good at it, it's not his favorite thing to do. And so we made the decision to take on this employee, and we got this guy Joel, who was brave and stupid enough to join us, I guess. So now it means that the stakes of this, it started off as a low stakes experiment, but now it means Joel has a wife and child, and he depends on us bringing enough work in to be able to pay for him. So Joel is now at Giddy Kipper. Joel is like the favorite child, because if anyone needs to eat or get paid, like in the family, it's Joel first, and then me and David afterwards. So Joel is like our favorite son. So we've been taking care of him so far, and it's made a big difference. It means that David and myself are a bit freed up to find, our job now is to, and my job specifically is to try and talk to people and see if they want some things made and some film stuff. So yeah, so I get to kind of wear a lot of hats. So that's and the nice thing about Giddy Kipper, which I've really enjoyed, is with acting you can probably be you might be like a producer or a director's favorite choice for the role, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get it. And you can work really. I believe in life. You know, it's good if you've got work that you enjoy and is meaningful to you, but and it's always nice when hard work pays off. But acting is very capricious, right? In terms of, you know, if me and Matt Damon were up for a part and I blew everyone away in a screen test, they're still casting Matt Damon because everyone knows who he is, and he's going to bring it, or you know, like it's very expensive. So you understand why people are conservative because, like, filming stuff is costs a lot of money, and they want to be sure that they try and get their money back. So it's nice for me to have something which is creative. It's a bit challenging because I'm not really a business person, and I'm in this sort of business world, and I've definitely had a few experiences where because I'm not a business person and I take everything very personally and I'm quite sensitive. So it means that I've sometimes when we've probably had like for more seasoned professionals who make content for people, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's fine. Clients always say this and that, and you just go ahead and fix it and do well." But I'd be like, "What do you mean you don't like it? I've worked so hard." So
Yeah, I'm the
it's
same. So
okay, yeah. So you understand, yeah. That's Giddy Kipper.
yeah, I'm very happy that you pursued this path as a director and a screenwriter, and I wish you a lot of good luck so you can evolve as a creator yourself.
And how is your screenwriting and stuff going? I'm keen to hear.
To tell the truth, I paused it because I decided to focus more on my on getting my master's degree at the moment. Yeah, so I'm also working full time at the IT company, so it's very hard to like combine the creative stuff and also the full time work. Yeah, but I am writing on weekends, like poems and lyrics for my musical band. And yeah, but actually, aside of the full full length script, I wrote a short film script. Maybe I could send it to you so you could read it.
I'd
It's
love
like
to.
a horror thriller one. Yeah,
Okay.
so it was like kind of an experiment for me because I've never written anything like that before. Yeah, so I post on the screenwriting, but I continue writing lyrics, poems. Yeah, so if you need a lyricist or a poet, I'm here for you to work.
Amazing.
Yeah, so
And how long have you been going with the podcast?
uh, actually, since last month, to tell the truth.
Okay.
Yeah,
Lovely.
my first guest was Natalia Martinson, who's also connected to the game industry. If you know her, she created Friendbow and Little Miss
Oh,
Fortune
wow.
games. Yeah, and she was also a voice actress, a very lovely person. Yeah, I had a lot of fun talking to her. Yeah, so it's kind of like a coincidence that the second person I'm interviewing is also connected to the game industry. Yeah, so
Amazing.
and let's look at the questions from fans because I gathered some, and of course most of them are connected to the heavy industry. Yay! We can maybe give the classes for this one. So was there any improvisation that Leon did when voice acting for Norman?
No. There was a lot of there was so much script to get through because obviously you have to record all of the different avenues that you can go, and so it's like, and I think I prepared for it like it was a play where I learned absolutely everything and I was on it for months beforehand. And I think they'd had a few days recording before I arrived where, because we had to record all of the face and voice separately, it was going a lot more slowly with another actor. And like they would get running behind and they would go, "Oh my God, all of these scripts, it's going to take so much longer." And what happened was I got in there because I'd done all this prep work. We started flying through it. And so the stuff that was would have been improvised really would have been more sort of like right at the end of the 2.5 days of recording all of the dialogue. You then have to do a load of screaming and shouting and and all of the stuff, all the different fighting. And the reason we had to do that right at the end was by the end of that, I had no voice and I couldn't speak at all anymore. And so the more sort of the bits which were improvised would be more physical bits, because we'd have like a lot of the time you'd be like, okay, so you're in a car and we're going to make this thing out of this metal, so the computer recognizes a sort of shape here, and then we're going to tie your hands here. And I remember with the person who sat just under David but ran the sort of soundstage, I remember we had a lot of fun like improvising physical bits and stuff together. And so, you know, him running at me with crash mats and then me having to avoid them and fall over and stuff like that. And then and it was during my final week of work on that where I met Mike, and who plays Lieutenant Carter Blake. And he's an American actor that lives in Paris. And the weird thing is we'd recorded our face and voice performances, and now we had to they pump that in, and we'd have to act to that like we were in these scenes with it. And it felt really weird because they were like, you need to do more movement. You'd be like, well, I'm just listening to him, so I wouldn't really be moving. And so but they're like, oh yeah, but like, shouldn't we do stuff? And Mike is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. And so for doing this ridiculous thing where we're trying to have to mime to our own voices and we're in wetsuits where, you know, it doesn't leave anything to the imagination, he just made me laugh all week. So yeah, no improvising, but definitely some fun times physically. And then also Mike, when we were doing this ridiculous like miming to our own performances, he just had me I was just every day I was crying with laughter. So, yeah, I bet he. Go on.
Yeah, are you still keeping in touch with him or not? No.
No, it's the great sadness of the life of an actor, Diana, where you meet these people and you have these intense experiences for like 7 days or 2 weeks, or even maybe if it's a longer job, maybe even like a few months, and you end up falling in love with everyone and you think they're great and they're going to be your friends forever, and then everyone goes back to their lives and you don't hear from them. And I always remember thinking like, these are going to be my new best friends, they're amazing. And then you realize it's kind of like this, it's a bit more like a circus life where you come together for those moments. And you see, next week I'm going to be working with some people that I've actually worked with quite a few times now. And what's nice, I guess, about having been in the industry as long as I have is it's not like there'll be a few people along the way you keep in touch with, but then if I saw Mike tomorrow, I'd be like, oh my God, like it'd be great. And it'd be like, but you know, he lives in Paris, I don't, and all that stuff. So yeah, but sadly not in touch with him, but he made quite the impression on me. He was one of the funniest men I've ever met.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's quite heartbreaking to see that actors don't keep in touch after working with each other.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I guess because it's so peripatetic. That's not quite the right word. I know what I mean, but I don't think I pronounced it right. It's, you know, if you're very successful as an actor, you're doing a lot of travel and you're moving around, so you're always living this life of like, and now I'm with this group of people for 6 weeks, and now I'm over here in a new group of people for 6 weeks and stuff like that. I mean, I did a Neil Marshall film a few years ago called The Lair. And I made some good friends on that, like Kabong and Troy, I keep in touch with. And so you find some people along the way that sort of stay with you a little bit. But generally speaking, it's a bit more like, whenever I finish a job now, I just say, I'll see you on the next one, whatever that is. And, you know, you may or may not. And like, that's the sort of deal, I guess.
As for a lot of questions were connected with the unreleased DLC chapter of Norman.
Oh, yeah.
And if Heavy Rain Chronicles hadn't been cancelled, would Leon have had any insight into Jack Rayleigh's character?
Into whose character?
Yeah, Jack Rayleigh's character. To tell the truth, when I first read this question, I had no idea who Jack Rayleigh is, because I'm a big fan of Heavy Rain, but then I found out that Jack Rayleigh is a character connected with the unreleased DLC chapter. So he was like with Norman. Do you have any information about him? Because
no, so I mean it was talked about, and we were told that we might be coming back to record that, but I never saw any scripts or anything like that, so I don't know about that character at all. I mean, I was, that you know, I was sad not to go back and do some more.
Yeah, I hope that they will. So I think there is like an anniversary, 15 years.
Oh
It's
wow!
been since Heavy Rain, yeah. I remember I watched the first Let's Play when I was like 14, I think. And now I'm 24, so it's been 10 years.
Oh wow! Wow!
Yeah.
Oh.
As for the next question connected to Heavy Rain, what does Leon think about Heavy Rain community now, especially on TikTok?
Well, I have joined TikTok, and I think I don't know. Like, what's been interesting is the people who I've like responded to. Like, I can see that they're Norman's fans and stuff, but I think people are. I think because I joined TikTok because of my daughter, and Vanessa was away with work, and I was very busy with Giddy Kipper, and I think I was just being a terrible parent, and I wasn't being very nice to Lila. And we had this night together. I was like, okay, tomorrow I'm shelving all work. I'm not doing any work. We're gonna be together, and you're gonna show me some memes, show me some stuff. Like, what is this TikTok? I want to see. And so I did my first little TikTok video, which was me and Lila were in bed, and I was talking about what a shit day it had been, and because I've been a terrible parent. And then Lila, because Lila thinks I'm quite zesty. Now, zesty was a word that was new to me, when I think what is meant by zesty in people is someone who's a bit like preppy and maybe a little bit camp or a bit exuberant and all of these kind of things. And Lila, I was like, let's do a TikTok video and you can direct me. So she was like, we're going to do a get ready with me video. And so we did a get ready with me video, and we put it out there. And over that time period, and I probably should do some more soon, I was really enjoying this whole idea of this character we were calling Zesty Boy. And what I noticed is obviously because the interesting thing is like, this is lovely getting these questions from fans, but like, obviously, I think sometimes when you've been in something like that people see, they think, oh my God, you must be like, you live this kind of life, right? And it's like, oh no, I'm just like a jobbing actor, performer, decorator, whatever. I'll get involved. And so what I've noticed about the some of the fans on TikTok is they seem very confused. They're like, this is definitely not Leon, and this is definitely not the actor who played Norman Jayden. And I'm like, hi, it's me. So I have to say, what I really enjoy about TikTok though, is I think like Instagram, obviously, because it's mainly for older people that use that, and Instagram is a bit more like, oh, look at me living this amazing life, and I'm in this kind of place here, and it's all about this look and this putting it out there. People's Instagram lives are very different from their actual lives. Whereas what I really enjoy about TikTok, especially my experience of TikTok, is it's just kind of like silly and irreverent, and like the less posed it is, almost the better. And so I've really enjoyed doing that. And so it's just I'm old, Diana, so it's I haven't spent that much time on there, but I definitely I loved having little bits of interaction with people, like your good self, who are, who at some point, Heavy Rain really meant something to you. And so that's just a real honor, if like people know you from your work and more than that, they like it, then I mean, how nice is that when a stranger is already predisposed to like you because of something you've done? That's quite nice.
Yeah, as for TikTok, so I have a little brother who is 12, and to tell the truth, I sometimes just don't understand what he says because of all those slang words that he uses. Yeah, so I understand you with all this.
Oh yeah, I looked up some Gen Alpha slang, and then all of the younger people I know will go like, how do you know that? Because I was like, Skibbity Ohio toilet,
Oh, yeah.
and this, and they're like, how's he know? Because it's almost like they think they've kept it like their own little secret. And I just did a YouTube of like Gen Alpha slang for old people, and I got these things, and so yeah, it's I guess every generation has their own, cultural zeitgeist, which is quite fun.
Yeah, that's right. And the next question is connected with social media because it says, if Norman had a social media account, what do you think he would post?
Ooh, I think depending on how much tryptophan he'd had, it would be quite. I
Quite
think
various posts.
yeah, and I think Norman would be one of those people that would be like, I'm going on a break, but now I'm back, and then like there's been no time, and then he'd be like, and he'd always be deleting his account and then starting a new one. I think because he'd be like up and down and a bit all over the place, and then he'd probably do loads of posts on a big tryptophan high, and then he'd look back on it and be like, oh my god, how long have I been doing this? It's all like that, and he'd be trying to delete them, and it'd be already out there. And so I think Norman's quite troubled. He's got some issues.
Yeah, I think what you described, it really suits his character. Yeah, I think he would be like that. And the next question, if Leon and Norman could meet in real life, would he be good friends with him?
Oh, sure. I mean, like, I'd be like, hey, Norman, that tryptophan stuff seems quite powerful. Like, can I have some? And we'd go on a tryptophan trip together. And then, of course, like I'd ask him if we could, if I could wear the glasses and then do all of that cool stuff. And yeah, that'd be really cool. So yeah, I think we'd definitely get on. I'd just teach him to say his name better now.
Yeah, and the last question from the fan. Which traits of the character you played would you like to have in real life? So it cannot be connected with maybe Norman, but with any character that you'd like.
Well, I'd say obviously the amazing thing about Norman is he's very talented, but he's troubled.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've been reading a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, and he's an FBI negotiator, hostage negotiator. And I think anyone that devotes their life to that kind of service, and of course, being a psychological profiler is, it's a real crossover between science and art, because you're kind of building up these pictures of what you imagine from people's evidence of their behavior. So I guess I think Norman, in my mind, is probably to have a mind palace like Sherlock's, where you can start to really like piece together stuff in that way. I would love to have that ability, because I tend to be a bit more instinctive and intuitive, and so to have that capacity for deep thought and sustaining it, so that you can kind of really build up a picture to help stop bad things happening in the world, like murders or child abduction. That's it's pretty, obviously, as well, it's a pretty heavy job to do, because you're dealing with real life and death circumstances. So yeah, so to have made that sacrifice where your life's probably not going to be that enjoyable, but that you are doing good in the world, like, I admire that about Norman.
Yeah, that you're changing the world for the better.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And we're done with questions, but I have the last section that is like the game, this or that. So it will be like a quick choice between two variants. So the first one is stage or screen.
Stage.
Comedy or drama.
Comedy.
Singing or dancing.
Dancing.
Scripted roles or improvisation.
Both. Improvisation. But both, but improvisation.
Spontaneous road trip or planned vacation.
Spontaneous road trip.
Superhero or villain.
Villain.
Early bird or night owl.
Early bird.
Art gallery or live concert?
Art gallery.
Rainy days or sunny days?
Sunny days. Always sunny.
History or future?
Future.
A director or screenwriter? That's quite a tough one.
Screenwriter. Screenwriter.
Hollywood blockbusters or indie films?
Indie films.
Filming in a studio or on location?
Location. All the way.
Yeah, so that was all for today. And before we wrap up, do you have maybe any exciting announcement that you would like to share with us? Maybe there are some plays or maybe movies that we should look forward to, or maybe festivals like the Rewind.
Oh yeah. I would say this. I don't know if it will remain this, but there is one thing I filmed early last year, which I got to work with an amazing actor called Sam Claflin, and he is in this Amazon series at the moment. It's called Lazarus. I'm not sure if that'll be changed. It might be changed because there's another TV show in the UK called Lazarus, and so they might change the name. It also has Bill Nighy in it. Sadly, I didn't get to meet Bill Nighy, but I have a small but important part in this, and I'll tell you a little. We'll finish with another one of my long stories. Initially, this self-tape, so that's an audition you do at home, came through, and it was for this part where he had just a couple of lines, but he was going to be in a few episodes, and the character was described as the most boring man in the world. And me and my wife looked at this, and I was like, I don't think I'm really right for this. But anyway, we'll do it. Let me try and act as well as I can. I'll act boring. So we did this and just send it off, because you never know what people think or what they're looking for. You can't. The minute you start trying to judge that, then you're sort of out of the creative process. And my agent got back to me a week later, and they said they really loved that tape, but they think there's another role you're better suited for. And they sent over the script, and I was like, okay, cool. And they looked, the producer and director would like to meet you. And I was like, excellent. So I read this other role, and this role was way more fun. Like, not in as many episodes, but like this one big sort of pivotal scene, which is a really well written scene. But I went in to meet them, and I ended up getting this job. But the funny thing about this was the part I auditioned for, obviously initially, was the most boring man in the world. And whatever I did in that tape, they saw, and I didn't know whether to be insulted or complimented with this offer of this other part, because I did my most boring, I was trying to do boring acting, and they saw borderline personality disorder.
Oh.
So that's the part I ended up playing. And a little bit of a spoiler, this is a big tease for the fans if you watch it when it comes out, is my character gets killed. And it is an unbelievably good death. And I think the death is going to be one of those moments where you go, oh! And I think my daughter is going to probably play that on hard repeat, just watching me get killed over and over. Because, it's very funny. So that's going to be coming. I don't know when that's coming out, but that's something to look forward to in terms of my acting work, for sure.
We're really looking forward to it, to seeing it. So I'll share.
After all of these years, Diana, it's so nice to actually meet you and see and speak to you.
Thank you very much. So I'll share all the links for Giddy, Kipper, also for your social media, in order for people to know more about your work. Yeah. And thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of Enigma podcast. Yeah, I'm very happy, and it's a big honor for me so that you joined me today. Yeah, and as for our viewers and listeners, I would really like you to comment who would you like to see next time as well. Yes, and I hope that you really liked this episode. And yes, maybe as for the final part, could you say goodbye to our viewers as a Norman Jayden?
Norman Jayden. Okay. Boston. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to say goodbye to everyone. Thank you. Oh, I've gone a bit New York. Anyway, we'll say Norman's from New York now. Anyway, he's left Boston behind and he's moved to a different province. I'm going to say thank you so much for listening. Norman Jayden says, get your glasses on, get out there in the sunshine, and take as much tryptophan as you can get.
Yeah. Oh, there is like a.
Wow.
That's the
Did you see
power
that?
of Norman. He just threw the party. And it got
Yeah,
confused.
there's some crazy stuff happened. That was great.
Yeah, so see you next time, guys, and goodbye.